Mr. Eule.
Thank you, Senator Capito, Senator Carper, and members of the committee. This hearing could not be timelier. As the Framework Convention on Climate Change meeting in Paris draws closer, it is important for policymakers to take a clear-eyed view of what a new post-2020 agreement might hold. The main points I'd like to make, which are detailed in my written testimony, are as follows. First, the Obama administration's unilateral emissions reduction commitment for Paris is unrealistic and doesn't add up. We estimate that 41 to 45% of the administration's emission target remains unaccounted for, and that's assuming EPA's Clean Power Plan survives court scrutiny, a big if. Selling such an uncertain plan internationally may prove very difficult. Second, the emission goal nations have offered are hugely unequal and will not change appreciably the rising trajectory of global emissions. While the United States, Europe, Japan, and a few others have offered large emission cuts, nearly all developing countries, particularly the large emerging economies, have offered little beyond business as usual. A recent report from the Framework Convention estimates that even in the unlikely event all country pledges are implemented to the letter, global emissions will still rise about 18% between 2010 and 2030, within or close to the range of where emissions were headed anyway. Given how the Framework Convention is structured, this should surprise no one. Third, the disparity in national commitments results from the fact that most countries place a greater priority on economic development than they do on cutting emissions of greenhouse gases. More than 1 billion people worldwide lack access to the modern energy services that could lift them out of poverty. Coal will remain for some time the fuel of choice for electrification in developing countries. Using data from Platts, we estimate that on the eve of the Paris climate talks, 1.2 trillion watts of new coal-fired power plants are under construction or planned throughout the world. That's about 3.5 times the capacity of the entire U.S. coal fleet. A carbon-constrained world, this is not. Fourth, the administration's plan will likely result in emissions from the U.S. leaking to other countries, merely moving, not reducing them. The United States has a tremendous energy price advantage over many of its competitors. Overregulation from EPA, however, could force energy-intensive industries to flee to other countries, similar to what we are seeing in Europe, where energy costs to industry are 2 to 4 times higher than here in the United States. Fifth, developing countries will not undertake any meaningful commitments without large doses of financial aid. China, for example, has proposed that developed countries kick in 1% of their annual GDP from 2020 on, which in 2014 would have implied a U.S. contribution of $170 billion. Other suggestions are equally extravagant. Whatever the final finance provisions look like, a great deal of the U.S. share of this funding will have to be appropriated by the Congress. Six, technology is the key. At its most fundamental level, reducing greenhouse gas emissions is a technology challenge. Existing technologies can make a start, but as we have seen, they are not capable of significantly cutting emissions on a global scale and at an acceptable cost. That is why the Chamber will continue to emphasize energy efficiency and policies designed to lower the cost of alternative energy rather than raising the cost of traditional energy. Finally, there is the larger question about the real goal of the Framework Convention. The organization's Executive Secretariat, Christiana Figueres, recently had this to say about the Paris deal, quote, "This is the first time in the history of mankind that we are setting ourselves the task of intentionally, within a defined period of time, to change the economic development model that has been reigning for at least 150 years since the Industrial Revolution," end quote. The same free enterprise economic model Secretary Figueres wants to discard is the same model that has produced the largest flourishing of human health and welfare in all of history. The rest of the world understands that affordable, available, and scalable energy is not the problem, it's the solution. Given all this, it seems clear that the Paris Agreement, whether it has legal force or not, should be submitted to the Congress for its approval. Otherwise, it is hard to see how anything agreed to in Paris will be binding on any future administrations or Congresses. Back in 1997, the Clinton administration offered up an unrealistic U.S. goal and, disregarding clear guidance from the Senate, signed the Kyoto Protocol, a treaty it knew was political poison and therefore never bothered to submit to the Senate for its advice and consent. It now looks like the Obama administration is set to repeat the mistake of signing onto a lopsided deal and making promises future presidents and Congresses may be neither willing nor able to keep. As the late, great Yogi Berra might have said, it's deja vu all over again. Thank you.
Thank you.